Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and you have just joined the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast. Today I have a guest. It's not just a guest, it's a doctor, Dr. Sheryl Ziegler. And she's here to talk to us about her experience and her expertise, really, in the area of burnout, more specifically, mommy burnout. Sheryl, or Dr. Ziegler, welcome.
Thanks for having me. And it is experience for sure, as well as
So,
expertise.
so doctor means what? You're a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist. What's the terminology?
Yes, I have a doctorate in psychology, and I'm also a registered play therapist. And I'm a psychotherapist that's been in private practice in Denver for over 14 years, and overall been practicing for over 20 years.
Wow. Okay. So I'm assuming you didn't start out focusing on moms or burnout. You were just doing your thing. And
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened? How did this become a topic that you felt like you should be focused on?
Yes, I didn't. You're exactly right. I had no idea. So for really, my practice name is the Child and Family Therapy Center, and so I really specialize in treating children and families. And what happened was probably right now, about 10 years ago, women kept coming in, the moms, and they would be there for, let's say, the initial meeting, and they thought they were there to talk about their kids. But what wound up happening was they said the same things over and over. And I just noted it. It was like, I'm so exhausted all the time. I'm a bad mom. I still hear that all the time. I don't know what I'm doing. And then ultimately, they would kind of be like, is this it? Like, I got married, I got the house, I have my job, and I'm really not fulfilled. Like, is there more? Please tell me there's more. And so I just started noting that. I had my first kid 12 years ago, and then I was still just noticing. And then I had my second kid. And for me, that's when I felt what they were talking about. For me, it was a feeling of just drowning. Like I just felt like I was underwater, and then I would come up for like this huge gulp of breath and hope that I could stay up. And then I would go back down. And then in that moment I was like, this was again 10 years ago. So blogs and all of that weren't really as big. This wasn't something at all that people were talking about. And I just had the very fundamental thought that the world would be a better place if everybody just knew that we were probably all feeling the same way. And so I used to say, it's even in the introduction of Mommy Burnout, like I used to think, oh my gosh, if only my 3 o'clock knew how my 4 o'clock felt, and that the 6 o'clock felt the same way as them, like the world would just be a better place. And so that's when I just started writing. And it takes a while to get a book out, but I just started noticing how I was feeling, writing and looking for different stories of moms of all different ages too. I think the cover's a little deceiving. It looks like it's for young moms, but it's really, I cover everywhere from babies to sending your kid off to college.
And what about after that?
Yeah, I didn't cover the after that, but
Well, you
you
need
know,
a second version.
I know. And I think that's that there's like two things I didn't cover that I get asked about. The first one that I get most asked about is daddy burnout. And they're just like, what about the dads? And why aren't you talking about dads? I get a lot of flack for that till this day. And what I have observed is just that not that dads don't experience stress, but that it's just different, that it's experienced differently. That's how I feel about dads. So yes, I'm sure that there could be a book about daddy burnout, but I don't feel qualified to write that really, because the dads that I see that are experiencing stress, but not to the level of burnout the way moms are. That's just my experience. That's number one. But number two, the after college, it's interesting. It's like, I know it's very stressful after college, especially since 30% or more of kids come back to live at home. But I don't know, like burnout I use as a real clinical term, like the psychological term. And so I don't know that at that point when your kids are in your 20s, you feel burned out. You feel, I think, stressed out, and sometimes like without a guide. Like what is the right thing? When do I tell my kid they got to get out? They got to be on their own. So I feel like there's just like different stressors.
Hmm. Well, and also, like, look, if you were to write a book about baking bread, it would be funny if someone came up to you and said, "Yeah, you wrote about book about baking bread. Why didn't you write a book about churning butter?" Well, because the book's about bread, right?
Yeah,
Like
I like
that's
that. I
why.
should get tougher on my answers. I'm
Like,
always like, I'm sorry.
right, because the book is about mommy burnout. That's why.
Yeah.
It's not that daddy burnout doesn't exist, but this book focuses on moms. So let's kind of go back a little bit. What is mommy burnout? Like you described some of the commonalities in the clients you were seeing, but what is it? You said it's a clinical term. So define
Yeah.
it a little bit.
So in the 1970s, they started studying ER docs and nurses, essentially caregivers, because they started to see, high turnover, high dissatisfaction. And so eventually what came out of that was the notion that stress is on a continuum and that we all on a daily basis experience stress. Then we have chronic stress, and then chronic stress gone awry turns to burnout. And the World Health Organization, even in the year 2018, came out with it also being an ICD-9 classified diagnosis as chronic physical and emotional exhaustion that results from feeling cynical or unaccomplished in your job. And so essentially what really happened, like the backstory is my original title to this book was not Mommy Burnout. It was just modern day motherhood, right? And so my agent said, oh, that's really nice, but you're going to need to define what it is you're talking about that's wrong in modern day motherhood. And so it actually took me a little while to figure out what am I talking about. And one of the coolest things that I came across is that Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique, that was written in 1962. And the first chapter of that book is called The Problem That Has No Name. And so I started reading it and I just literally consumed it because it was exactly what I was still talking about in 2018 and 2020 still. And so it was so interesting because she essentially said, I interviewed all of these mothers, all of these women, and they all felt the same way, but it doesn't have a name. And back then, they would go to their regular doctor. They would prescribe them Valium. That was mommy's little helper, the
Mhm.
little yellow pill. So today it's wine, and back then it was Valium. And they just basically said, stop being so hysterical. And so I was fascinated that, like, she said, this is the problem that has no name, still has no name. And then I felt like, okay, I'm going to give it a name. And so that's how I came up with burnout. I feel like the mothers are the caregivers. Like if we looked at them in an employment role, they are this is their job and they're exhausted physically and emotionally by it. They don't feel like they do a good job. They become cynical. And the other part about like that cynicism is that nothing they do is going to matter. Like when you're in burnout, you just feel like, what does it even matter? Who even cares? Well, all right, I'll just let them stay on their iPads all day. You just start to give up. So
Mhm.
that's the long backstory on how I came up with burnout.
So you said something before. You said they don't feel like they're good parents. So what drives that emotion?
It's just the feeling that you don't know what you're doing, that your kids maybe aren't leading the life that you thought they would, even if they're a toddler. What if when they hit another kid and you get the phone call from preschool that says, oh, just wanted to let you know, little Johnny, hit little Susie today on the head with a block. It's like today's parent feels like they did something massively wrong.
Mhm.
Like they don't understand that kids hit other kids. Kids are mean to other kids. This is a normal part of development. So as opposed to freaking out and thinking, see, I hear that all the time. I'm clearly doing something wrong. That's what people say to me all the time. Instead, they just don't think to themselves, oh, well, this is a normal part of development. I'll talk to them about it. We'll come up with a plan around it. I'm going to try to reduce that, but it's normal for a preschooler to do that. And I see that happening, like I said, from even babies. If a baby doesn't sleep through the night, if a baby doesn't latch on right, if a mother can't breastfeed, she blames herself. It's the first thing she does.
So
I'm
would you
bad.
say would you say they also like blow it up to make it way worse than it really is? Like they awfulize things. They just make it into like, a huge issue when it doesn't necessarily need to be.
Yeah. I mean, in psychology, we do have a term for that, catastrophize.
That's the
Uh,
word.
yes, awfulize, catastrophize, it means the same thing. And so, yes, I do feel that way. It's very personal though. I mean, sometimes, parents will say like, what's wrong with him or what's wrong with her? But I find that first they're like, what's wrong with me?
Mhm.
I'm doing something wrong. And then sometimes they shift to what's wrong with them. And so I'm really on a mission to destigmatize mental health, but also just try to get our parenting paradigm to shift. Like we used to be helicopters, and helicopter sounds like pretty good these days. Now
Mhm.
it's like that lawnmower, that snowplow, that type of parenting where we are just like, oh my gosh, no adversity, no failure, nothing goes wrong. I'll do everything. I'll sacrifice my last, hour of sleep for this kid. And I just say to people, that's not good for kids. It's not good for you, and it's not good for kids. And that's going to take like a pretty big systemic shift.
So let's go back. I'm interested in a certain age range. I'm interested in it all, but let's just say this kid is getting ready to go to university, 17, 18 years old, in that kind of age bracket. And as a parent, as a mom, you start witnessing certain behaviors that are maybe antisocial or maybe a little aggressive or passive aggressive or, very critical or whatever. And you kind of go, man, how's this kid going to manage on their own? And did I create this? Right? Like, how is this possible at this phase of life? Right? They
Yep.
should know better. How's this going to work? So, how do you work with moms who are in that kind of state of mind?
Yeah, I feel like I'm really in that right now. I mostly see tweens and teens, and especially right now during this time where kids may be acting out and acting a little bit differently than even they normally have been. So it's been coming up a lot. So I think some of the things are, we aren't here to solve like your 17 or 18-year-old problems per se. I think what the role of a parent is to help them solve it. We have
Mhm.
to remember that all throughout development, one of the biggest goals of just developing as a human being is autonomy, independence, and the sense that you can take care of yourself. I do it, right? It starts off at 2 years old. No, I do it all the way to 17, where it's just like, leave me alone. I know better. I know what I'm doing. I don't need you, mom and dad.
Right.
There's always that push. And so, as opposed to having this be like push, pull, no, I know better. Oh, you're going to be a disaster. It's more of like, I think being able to talk to your kid, a 17 or 18-year-old, they're a young adult. You should be able to talk to them and say, here's some of the things I'm concerned about. I'm wondering, A, are you concerned about them? Do you notice? And then, get your baseline, because just because you're concerned, you think they're sleeping in too much, or you suspect they're smoking pot, or you suspect they're sneaking out at night, whatever they're doing. If they don't see it as a problem, you're not starting off at a place where you're going to problem solve anyway. So there's got to be, I think it's a little bit of a dance and an art with the teenagers to essentially say, all right, well then I'll meet you where you're at. If you don't think smoking pot is a problem, anything else in your life that you think maybe could use a little help, it's just meet them where they're at.
Hmm.
So that's some of the advice. And really, once you do that, it's called joining. And once you've joined them and they see you as a partner and not somebody out to point out every single one of their flaws, right? Because that's what we know, that today's teenager feels more pressured than ever. They feel pressure to be perfect, pressure to go to college, pressure to know what they want to do for the rest of their lives at 16, 17 years old. I think it's ridiculous. So that's the other thing that I say to the kids that I'm working with. I'm working with a bunch of kids right now that are going to be seniors, and I'm working with them on, forget this idea of what you're going to major in. I don't care what you're going to major in. Supposedly, college is supposed to be a time of exploration. So once the parents see me model that, and they see also how the conversation flows so much easier when you're just like, don't worry about what you want to do. I don't care what you want to do. The first 2 years are all prerequisites anyway. There's just this, a little pressure valve gets released.
So I want to share with you a little bit about my kind of philosophy, and you can give me feedback. I'm open to like a little adjustment, but my feedback, my approach is this: is that I agree with you 100% on the subject that our goals for our kids are that we want them to grow up to be independent, well-adjusted, happy, healthy, in good relationships, let's say contributors positively to society, and on and on, right? We want these things. But very often we spend our lives telling them what to do. right?
Mhm.
Go brush your teeth, go put your PJs on, go do your homework, go, eat your dinner before you can have dessert. And all, like we're constantly giving them instruction, nonstop, 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 nonstop. And then we wonder why they're not independent because we're constantly telling them what to do. And so one of the things that I tell the people that I coach, because inevitably we end up talking about parenting, is like, think about what you want for your kids and if your strategy leads to the outcomes you're looking for. Because if you're constantly telling them what to do and giving them direction, how do they learn independence? Those two things don't go together. So that's thing number one. Any thoughts on that?
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's just like this slight change of wording that I feel like can really resonate with people. If you want independent kids, then you have to raise them to be independent. I
Right.
think that's great.
And then the second thing is, like, as parents, we want to have influence over our kids, a positive influence. So how do you influence your children? So number one is modeling, right? So like, if your kids are yelling because the world isn't working the way it is, and you yell at them to behave, well, who do you think they're learning it from, right? Like, so what they learn is, when the world doesn't operate the way I want it to, I'm allowed to lash out. I'm allowed to raise my voice. I'm allowed to hit. I'm allowed to freak out, right? So number one is modeling. But the second thing, and I think this is like a little tricky, is that your influence is dramatically higher when your kids feel that you see the best in them, that you see them in the greatest light. So if you see, you mentioned before, if you see their flaws and constantly point out their flaws, they don't want to hang around you because they don't like the way you see them. But if they know you see the best in them, then they're open to your guidance and your influence. And so if your kid is, misbehaving 99% of the time, my advice to clients is, let's focus on the 1%. Let's just focus on that, because that's the only way that they will be or could possibly be open to our influence. What are your thoughts on that one?
It's really interesting. My first thought about that is, oh my gosh, but we already have everybody deserves a trophy kind of mentality, right? Where what my this is this it's a you're talking and my brain's like feeling two ways. On the one hand, I feel like when our kids are young, especially, we throw out good job, good job, good job, good job all the time. So even starting with that, I always say, don't say good job. Everything's not a good job. Say, be specific. I really appreciated the way you loaded the dishwasher. Hey, thanks for putting your shoes away. Like, be very specific about what you're praising, right?
Great.
So I feel like that. But then on the other hand, yes, emotionally, I agree. When I know when I'm in someone's presence who sees like the good in me and just laughs at or ignores my flaws, like I know that feeling. It feels really good. Like it's just a really, like, you feel like this person is just like my cheerleader and it feels really good. I just think it's tricky and there's a fine line between focusing on the 1% that is going well. It's, we call solution focused. So strength based, solution focused, I'm all for that. I just think we'd have to teach parents how that doesn't mean that everything your kid does, though, is like, good job, you're the best. You deserve to play more, or you should sit at the front of the class, like that kind of stuff. So,
I agree.
do you
Yeah.
have tips for that? Like how people can do both? It doesn't have to be either or.
Well, I just think that if we spend a whole lot more time focusing on the good stuff, then when the bad stuff does arise, we have a different approach. And then our kids are much more open to hearing it. But I find, like, as parents, we're focused on the bad stuff more often than not. Focused on fixing, adjusting, correcting, disciplining, all those words that make me itchy.
You're right. I mean, I think that it's probably a kid probably experiences a parent today as being like one extreme or the other. Either they're like critical and telling them everything they have to do and putting pressure on, and then they're like, "Oh, but good job. You're so great." And maybe there's not that much in the middle, like, "Hey, you're pretty average at that." And that's okay. And if you want to
Right,
get better, you got to work harder. Like
right.
there's just a little bit of like, I don't know if you agree with that. I've never really thought of it that way, but I do feel like I say a lot to parents in different contexts, but you got to work in the gray. you're good at white, you're good at black, you're not so great at gray.
Hmm.
And I think that our world could use a lot more like gray in the middle. Like, I can discipline you and love you and be loving at the same time. I think it can be experienced as everything was going great. And then little Susie didn't listen. And then everything went to hell. Like it
Right.
just becomes
Right.
one extreme or the
It's
other.
right. Let's go back to this whole idea of burnout. So moms come in, they're expressing exhaustion, lack of fulfillment or satisfaction. They're feeling a little trapped, feeling like there's no end in sight, right? Like this is a lifetime commitment, man, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't know it was going to look like this, right?
Right.
Um like my kids are now from 20 to 27 years old, right? And while they're independent and on their own, but sometimes I'm like, really? Right? Like we're still dealing with some of this. But so how do you help moms who have burnout?
So, the first thing I feel like is to identify that it is that we are not accepting that functioning at this pace and at this rate is just the norm. So, get used to it. Buckle up. You got 20 more years of this. I think that's the first place to say, no, I do not accept that I come last on the list, that if I participate in any kind of self care, I'm selfish, that if I don't go broke trying to give my kids everything, that I didn't do enough for them. I feel like the first thing we need to do is I first establish where on the continuum of stress they are. And then we say, you have to reclaim, that is the subtitle of the book, how to reclaim your life and raise healthier children in the process. I think that women particularly need to know that they can reclaim their lives, themselves, their health, their careers, their interests, their passions, that they can do that and be the mom that they want to be. And so that's one of the first things is like, it's almost like identifying where they are with their stress and then saying, no, that's not acceptable. Here are the outcomes. If you continue to function like this, here's what your present, short-term future, and long-term future is going to likely look like if you keep running at this rate. And I feel like right then and there, it's like a sense of relief. And then it's the now what? Okay, I'm ready to make some shifts. Now what? So what I've done, what I did in the book was I kind of broke down the sections where I see the most common sources of stress for women. And I have a prescriptive plan at the end of each chapter. And I really just implement that with women. So, for example, the first chapter is just why am I so overwhelmed? So, we kind of go through what burnout looks like in motherhood. And some of the things are people laugh at because they can relate. So, little things like, do you have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep? Do you lack energy throughout the day? Do you beat yourself up for parenting decisions? Do you reach for junk food? Are you looking forward to that glass or two or three of wine every night, just a little
Hmm.
too much? Do you get sick and stay sick longer? Do you have no interest in sex? Do you dodge people's phone calls? So I just sort of there's a checklist, and then I see what areas they are doing well at. They might be like, no, I go out with my girlfriends every week. That's all good. But yeah, you're right. I can't remember the last time I had sex with my husband. So we just figure out what's going well, what's not. And then I go through those areas. So the areas that I have found that women struggle most today in are lack of friendships. They let their friendships go. It's like one of the first things, right? If I had a stressful day today, but I had this happen to me. When was it? What's today? Oh, a couple days ago. It was the official first day of summer, but I had a really busy day, and I had a friend who was like, "I really want to see you," and it was 4 o'clock, and I wanted to cancel, and not because I didn't want to see her, but I just felt so stressed, and I just had to remember my own mantra, like, I will feel better when I leave. I know I will. So
Hmm.
I went a little bit later. I got there. I said, "Can I come at 4:45?" She said, "Yes." I stayed for an hour and a half, and you know what? It was all fine. But that's only because I know that friendships are so important. If not, I could have fallen in like everybody else and been like, you know what, today I'm crazy busy, right? And that's my biggest thing is ban busy. Stop saying you're so busy because it builds walls.
Hmm.
And if I tell you I'm so busy, you're not going to reach out to me. And
Right.
now there's another friend I don't have, right? So I'm a big it's my biggest takeaway from the book. If there was only one takeaway, it would be stay connected with your girlfriends,
Mhm.
with any friends, I guess. But girlfriends do have a particular effect on your oxytocin when you're with them. It's like your love hormone surges in the
Mhm.
presence of another female differently than it surges in the presence of a male friend, actually. So it's like friendships, family, like extended family, mother-in-law and mother of origin issues, when they're trying to help you. And I see that a lot, this resistance to, I don't want to hear what my mother or my mother-in-law has to say. They're outdated. They don't know modern stuff and what's going
Mhm.
on. And I think that can be actually a big mistake to shrug off kind of that wisdom. Um, Social media, I call it the social media mommy trap. It just makes you feel bad. It's the same effect it has on kids: increased depression, increase feelings of, low self-worth, and even increased thoughts of suicide. It's not
Really?
good for us. We got to dose that out. Wanting what's best for your children. I have a whole entire chapter on choices and how too many choices actually cause us greater levels of stress. And burnout in marriages, just how you feel like your husband doesn't get it, and there's this discord and disconnect. And of course, the working mom's dilemma. Do you have to choose? Can you really have it all? That's still a struggle for women today. And I think we've seen it in this pandemic, where the notion is that it's the women the last couple of months that are the ones who have given up their
Mhm.
career or backed off. They still see we are just wired to take care of our kids. So likely, if someone's going to back off on their career, it's more likely to be a woman than
Mhm.
it is a man. And then just being so sick and tired, like the lack of sleep, the lack of quality self-care. So those are the areas that I found affect women most. And then I just wrote a chapter on each one of them and give suggestions at the end.
So do you have your book beside you?
I do.
Show it.
This one,
Mommy Burnout. And
Mommy Burnout.
by Dr. Sheryl Ziegler.
Yes.
Where do we find it?
You can find it anywhere: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. And it's also on Audibles and Kindle. So super easy to get.
Okay, I have one more question. The question is about guilt.
Yep.
So
Mommy guilt.
I'm gonna guess that mommy burnout and guilt kind of go hand in hand. So
Yes.
how do you help women just kind of get over the guilt? Like, this is not serving you. So how do you help them get past it when it's like so deeply entrenched in their wiring?
It's a rewiring, and it's not an overnight process. It's usually like almost like homework, like try this little thing, see how that goes. But what I centered around mommy guilt is that if you feel guilt, there's some sort of dissonance between how much you're giving out and how much you're willing to take in. Meaning that you probably feel guilty because what? It's about giving. You didn't give enough time. You didn't give enough attention. It's about like I focused too much on work and I ignored my kids, whatever that might be, or I can't get them the newest and greatest clothes or an iPhone or whatever it is, right? It's this give and take situation. So when I can get women to really see that, if we truly, like, if I could change the cover of this book, I would have that notion of the woman putting on her oxygen mask on first and having the kid there waiting to have their oxygen mask put on. I really just say to them, the guilt will naturally subside. Not 100%. We all feel a little bit of guilt sometimes, but like the guilt will subside when you know what your purpose is, you know what your priorities are, and that you can confidently say, sorry, kids, it's Wednesday night and I'm not eating dinner with you because I'm going out with my girlfriends because that's good for me. And yes, you're crying, you're holding on to my leg, or you're rolling your eyes and saying, oh, you got to go out with your friends again. Yes, I do. Or, I have to work late tonight. Sure, if you work late 30 out of 30 nights a week, that's a natural guilt. But if you've got to work late, sometimes, like, I actually say to my kids, and I've been saying to them overtly because now they're seeing me work so much more from home. You know what? Every time I'm in that office, I'm working and I'm generating income for our family so that we can do things. So you need to respect that. I mean, it's just, there's no, I not that I never feel mommy guilt, but I really kind of rarely do because I
Hmm.
love what I do. I'm clear about why I'm doing it. And I can even say to you, I'm making a choice right now. I'm making the choice to be talking to you. All three of my kids are home right now and they're doing who knows what.
They're bringing in
And
the groceries.
yeah, bringing in the groceries, exactly, and putting them away. I hope they did. And I don't feel bad about that. I even said first, I said to them, "You guys put the groceries away that have to go in the freezer." And then I was like, "What? No, and put away the ones that have to go in the refrigerator." Because I was thinking, "All right, it's okay, just the freezer ones." And then I'm like, "No, what am I doing? Why am I putting more work onto me when they could easily do that?" So those are the kinds of things that have been helpful to me and helpful to the patients that I work with, because it's just small doses. I don't give them big things because
Mhm.
then it probably would backfire. But when I start giving them small things, they smile. They're like, wow, that felt actually kind of good. And they have to enlist their partner if they have a partner. If they're a single mom, it's different. But
Right.
if they have a partner, they have to enlist them in this notion as well that, like, I have to take care of myself first, so that I can refuel to be there for our kids. And that might mean working more or spending time with friends.
Mhm. I feel it's interesting because from a guilt standpoint, the reaction you're receiving, right? Like the eye roll or whatever you're talking about, it leaves it like it's like a bit of a punch in the gut, right? It's like, how do you, okay, fine, you just rolled your eyes and I'm still going to carry through with my plan, but I don't feel so good about it anymore. Right? So it's teaching people how to react, how to respond, and how to make sense of the eye roll or the grabbing the leg thing, how to put it into the right context and the right place.
Absolutely. I mean, they're egocentric and they're self-centered, and they think that we are here to serve them. And they think that because we sort of do. We have modeled our
Taught them.
parent. Yeah, we taught them, like, oh, I'm here to do absolutely everything for you. Cook, clean, laundry, put things away. I mean, kids who do chores these days, there's such a low percentage of kids who really have real responsibilities in their house, not a little bonus like, oh, could you set the table? Oh, thanks. But like every night you do that.
Hmm.
We've just gotten away. I mean, kids used to actually be people bred with each other to have kids to help them on farms and just help them work. That's what they saw
Right.
them as, workers. And we have totally flipped the table, and now we work for them and we are their servants and we cater to them. And then we wonder why we have generations of kids who are not that independent, who don't know how to deal with failure, who don't know how to go off and be on their own and accept that they're going to stumble and fall a lot. So,
Mhm.
with all those things, I also just model for my kids all of my failures. I really go out of my way to say, you know what, I didn't get chosen for that. Yeah, they passed. They went with someone else. Or, today a client got really mad at me and fired me. And I just let them know, because otherwise, I don't know how much failure they see or how
Mhm.
much struggle, maybe just struggle,
Right.
just
Yeah.
life's not easy. It's not easy for me either. And guess what? It's not going to get any easier.
Right.
And I don't want them to grow up under a falsehood that
So
it
so
will.
you're good with exposing your kids to the whole thing.
To the whole thing, the
Yeah.
good, the bad, the ugly, of course, in doses, what I think is pretty age appropriate. But I feel like that's what's arming them to be more resilient, to have the grit that everybody's talking about. Everybody wants their kid to be gritty. And I say, if you want your kid to be gritty, then they have to go through gritty things.
Hmm.
Otherwise,
Throw them a little dirt.
yeah, exactly. Just, it's, you can't just teach grit and resilience by talking about it. You do have to experience it, unfortunately, but you do. And so I think, doses of that are not just good for them, but actually essential for them.
Hmm. Hmm. I love this conversation. It was really interesting. It was gave me some things to think about for myself. Thank you for spending this time with me. Again, put up your book, please.
There you go, Mommy Burnout.
Mommy Burnout by Sheryl Ziegler, and lift it up again. Z for the Americans. Sorry, for the Canadians. Z for the Americans. Ziegler. Ziegler.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've loved this conversation.
And hopefully maybe one day, not that far down the road, we'll have it again when you write your second book about the older generation, because that's the
Yes,
one I really
exactly.
want to have at this point in my life.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll talk soon.